House account of this call was written in very polite terminology, wasn't it, of diplomatic exchanges, vague in the extreme. What, if anything, did we learn about the recalibration of this relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia?
Thank you for having me. If nothing else, it exposes the challenge that Biden has, having to reconcile promises he made during the campaign where he referred to the Saudis as a pariah, that they have to pay the price for their policies, and now concurrently being in a position where he has to act on those, including in areas related to human rights, as you mentioned, dissidents being detained by the Saudis, and then the Jamal Khashoggi report, coupled with the fact that the United States needs to hold its allies in the region firm as it's attempting to renegotiate a nuclear deal with Iran after President Trump withdrew from that deal a couple of years ago. So this call today exposes the delicate balance of having to address both of those concerns, or multiple concerns at the same time, where both the United States needs to pressure the Saudis, but also needs the Saudis as an ally as it tries to contain and deter Iran from any further activity.
OK, Benjamin, let's take those concerns one at a time. Firstly, the first one you mentioned, human rights. It is unclear whether or not the killing of the journalist, Mr. Khashoggi, was mentioned during the call. What sanctions, though, might the US consider to enforce the rule of law and the fair application of human rights in the country generally, and when it comes to the Crown Prince more specifically?
Well, there are not a whole lot of options available to the United States. There is no jurisdiction that the United States can enforce abroad, but what it can do is restrict the ability of those linked with the murder of the journalist or those associated with the conspiracy to murder him, prevent that, put travel restrictions on them, diplomatic restrictions, things of that nature, freezing assets perhaps if they can prove these things in the court. But beyond that, it'll be difficult to do anything further and not undermine U.S.-Saudi relations in other areas where the United States needs Saudi support. OK, well, Saudi Arabia also will be sizing up this new administration. We understand that the United States has just conducted its first airstrike under Biden against an Iran-backed target in Syria. What is it to make of Biden's stance vis-a-vis Iran? Well, it's demonstrating that the Biden administration will deliver on its position that it will not tolerate any activity by Iranians or Iranian-backed proxy militia groups against U.S. positions, U.S. servicemen and women, U.S. contractors and allies in the region. So this is the Biden team flexing that muscle and demonstrating it can do this at the same time as it is trying to renegotiate or restart talks for the nuclear deal. Benjamin Rad, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, President Biden has held a ceremony to mark the vaccination of 50 million Americans against the coronavirus. He said the US was weeks ahead of schedule on the path to immunizing 100 million people in his first 100 days in office, a key promise he made before his inauguration. But he also said the real challenge will come when the lines outside vaccination centers has evaporated and supply outstrips demand.
The time is coming, maybe 60 to 90 days, when the supply is adequate, but not enough people can access the shots or don't want them. To address that challenge, we're going to launch a massive campaign to educate people about vaccines, that they are safe and effective, and where to go to get those shots in the first place.
Well, here in the UK, more than 18 million people have had a first vaccine dose, equivalent to 1 in 3 adults. The Queen has spoken for the first time about having it. She urged others to do the same, saying anyone who is nervous should think of others first. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell reports.
They both had their vaccinations last month, and though the Duke is now in hospital being treated for a non-COVID infection, the Queen, unperturbed it would seem by her husband's absence, was earlier this week on a video conference with health officials from across the UK. The vaccination programme had stirred memories.
Well, having lived in the war, it's very much like that, you know, when everybody had the same idea. And I think this has rather sort of inspired that, hasn't it?
But how had the Queen found her own vaccination?
And as far as I can make out, it was quite harmless. It was very quick. And I've had lots of letters from people who've been very surprised by how easy it was to get the vaccine. And the jab was it didn't hurt at all.
There was understanding for people who are nervous of the vaccination, but a reminder that everyone has a responsibility to have it.
That it is obviously difficult for people to, if they've never had a vaccine, they ought to think about other people rather than themselves.
And there was a message to the scientists who developed the vaccines and all the staff who are administering them.
It is remarkable how quickly the whole thing has been done. And so many people have had the vaccine already. So you will have to keep up the good work.
Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Had a chance to hear it all.
OK, let's get some of the other day's news, shall we? The Oxford University has said that one of its laboratories researching COVID-19 has been hacked. The digital breach took place at a division of structural biology. A private security researcher said he found screenshots online from inside the lab's network. He said the hackers were Portuguese speakers operating out of South America and were financially motivated. An Oxford University spokesman said that no personal data was compromised and that the British intelligence agency GCHQ is investigating. The US space agency NASA has released a panoramic view of the landing site of the Perseverance rover on Mars. The panorama shows the rim of the Jezero crater where the rover touched down last week and the cliff face of an ancient river delta in the distance. It was taken by rotating the rover's mast 360 degrees. NASA says the panorama is composed of 142 individual images stitched together back here on Earth. And the former coach of the US women's gymnastics team has killed himself just hours after being charged with human trafficking and criminal sexual conduct. The body of John Geddert was found after he failed to surrender himself at the sheriff's office. The charges against the coach involved a number of young women, including 2 counts of sexual assault on a girl when she was just 13 years old and later at 16. Twitter will start allowing its users to charge their followers for access to additional content. The social media site says it's also considering subscription services to use its TweetDeck platform and making advanced analytical data available only to influencers. Now, the United States has called for restraint in Armenia after the Prime Minister led a rally of supporters saying he was trying to avert an attempted coup. Nikol Pashinyan took action against the armed forces, issued a statement calling for his government to resign. His opponents have set up camp outside Parliament. Mr. Pashinyan's popularity has dropped since Azerbaijan last year recaptured swathes of its territory that had been held by ethnic Armenian forces for nearly 30 years. Mark Labelle reports.
With family by his side, Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan rallies supporters in Yerevan. Ministers also joined him in solidarity after the country's top generals told him and his cabinet to resign.
Some people want to drag the army into unconstitutional processes. This is an attempted coup, but the people will not allow a military coup in Armenia.
The PM's plea also fell on international ears.
We urge all parties to exercise restraint. We remind all parties of the bedrock democratic principle that states' armed forces should not intervene in domestic politics.
But calls for the Prime Minister's resignation were made within earshot of Parliament. Opposition supporters buoyed by the military top brass's intervention after the Prime Minister's sacking of a commander angered them, on top of losing last year's bloody conflict with Azerbaijan. That defeat led protesters to storm Parliament back in November, moments after a Russian brokered deal had been announced, confirming Armenia's loss after 6 weeks of fighting in Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey-backed Azerbaijan not only recaptured areas around the enclave, but also took a key town inside it.
We lost the war. There were 5,000 victims, over 10,000 wounded, many still missing and prisoners of war. We also have a collapsed economy.
We turned our back on Russia, which we could not afford to do. We're pretty much welcoming Turkey. I am against that.
But Russia and Turkey are calling for calm inside Armenia.
Coup attempts can only destabilize the region, and that's why we are against it.
Right now, calls for calm appear to outweigh calls that could lead to a coup. Mark Lobel, BBC News.
Do stay with us here on BBC News. Still to come, the threat to the Amazon rainforest from online speculators hoping to get rich from deforestation. This is BBC World News, a reminder of our main story this hour. President Biden holds his very first telephone conversation with King Salman of Saudi Arabia ahead of the US releasing an intelligence report about the murder of a Saudi journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the Amazon rainforest is one of the great natural wonders of the world and one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. But now huge chunks of it are being sold off online on social media. Reporter Jal Fellet travels deep into the Amazon to investigate the murky online world where the rainforest is up for sale.
On patrol. Bitate and his friends are on the lookout for anyone trying to invade and occupy land in their indigenous reserve. The Uruweu community have been battling these so-called land grabbers for decades.
We know this job is very risky, but we're protecting our land.
Land grabbers often sell the land to people who cut down the trees and convert it to farmland. For Bitate's community, it's a threat to their way of life. I show Bitate a post on Facebook advertising for sale a plot of land inside his reserve.
This makes us very sad. This is a lack of respect towards the indigenous people, not only in my land, but in all of Brazil.
Land invasions happen with or without Facebook, but Facebook makes it easier than ever for sellers to find buyers. So using an undercover agent, we speak to 4 people trying to sell land on Facebook.
Hey, how did it go?
It was the most tense meeting we've had so far, in my opinion.
He's talking about the man selling land in Bitate's reserve. His name is Alvin Alves. He brought several official-looking documents, but not a legal land title. One of the documents shows he's a member of the Curupira Association.
The federal police labeled this association, this Curupira Association, as a criminal organization focused on stealing land from the indigenous people.
These associations occupy protected areas and lobby politicians in the capital Brasilia to grant the stolen lands to their members.
I'll tell you the truth. If this is not sorted out by Bolsonaro, it won't be solved.
Alvin told us one of the politicians helping him was a congressman, a man called Coronel Crisóstomo. I asked him if he knew the Curupira Association was occupying indigenous land.
No, I was never aware they were occupying indigenous areas.
And that the land was illegally acquired?
I didn't know, they didn't tell me. If they invaded it, they don't have my support anymore.
Facebook says their policies require buyers and sellers to comply with laws and regulations, and they stand ready to work with local authorities. The BBC contacted Mr. Alves for his response, but he declined to comment. As long as the authorities fail to act, the forest gets closer to what scientists fear could be a point of no return. João Fellet, BBC News, Rondônia.
Well, K-pop superstars Blackpink have emerged as the latest force in the global fight against climate change. The all-female group, who have billions of fans around the world, have decided to speak out just months before a major conference on climate change will be held here in the UK. They spoke to our correspondent Laura Becker in Seoul. Good for them. Well, staying with pop, Lady Gaga is offering $500,000 as a reward for the return of her 2 dogs after a gunman shot her dog walker and then stole the animals. The dog walker is being treated in hospital and is reportedly recovering well, but the suspect made off with 2 of the singer's 3 French bulldogs. The 3rd dog did manage to escape. Our North America correspondent David Willis has the story.
This leafy Hollywood street formed the backdrop to a crime so audacious that even the city's filmmakers might deem it implausible. It was here, late on Wednesday night, that a shot rang out.
It was the screaming that alerted me. I heard screaming, like a lot of it. I couldn't tell.
I thought it sounded like a man in extreme distress.
The man in question was Lady Gaga's dog walker. He'd been shot in the chest by 2 men who pulled up in a car and made off with 2 of her French bulldogs. A rescue worker was pictured retrieving a 3rd dog from the man's grasp as he lay bleeding on the pavement. Police say he struggled with the suspects before being hit by a bullet from a semi-automatic handgun. The incident comes just over a month after Lady Gaga won rave reviews for her performance at President Biden's inauguration ceremony. She's yet to comment on the incident, but has offered a $500,000 no questions asked reward for the dog's safe return. Frequently spotted with her pets in tow, Lady Gaga is known to be passionate about them and highly protective. They prove the inspiration for her own pet product line. And Miss Asia, the one that evaded capture, even has its own Instagram page with more than 220,000 followers. French bulldogs are in high demand here, but they're notoriously difficult to breed, and pedigree puppies can fetch as much as $10,000 apiece. The dog walker is said to be in a critical condition, but he is expected to survive. The question for detectives, was this a random attack, or was he targeted because of his celebrity client? David Willis, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Well, it's time to get all the very latest sports news for you.